The National Credit Redemption. June 14, 2019 by Anna von Reitz. When we are afraid of someone, and have cause to be, it's hard to communicate with them in a rational, factual way. Most of us retain a quite childlike response pattern when we are confronted with our own wrongdoing as adults: avoidance, excuses, lies to try to escape, blaming third parties, and so on. We know it's wrong. We know in our heart of hearts that our excuses and explanations aren't going to work. We are scared and we are wondering, oh, no, what happens now? That's the position that the bankers are in. They've been caught red-handed, and their crimes go back at least 150 years. So, first they blame the colluding governments, and next they blame the military, and then it's the regulatory agency's fault, and then, it's the victim's fault. We've suffered through all these various stages of denial, excuses, and explanations, all the blaming and gaming. What it comes down to is this: the bankers are afraid, and to some extent, they have cause to be. This makes it hard for them to think straight and have a sane conversation with me. When we make a deposit of an actual asset, silver, gold, etc., with a bank, it is called a special deposit. Special deposits are loans to the bank and are carried on the bank's books as a liability, because 1. The banks have to pay back these special deposits, and 2. They have to pay some reasonable amount of interest on these special deposits, which they are using as the basis of making loans to other people throughout their fractional reserve banking system. What this means in microcosm is that when I give them a 10-pound bar of gold, they accept that as a special deposit and put it on their actual assets ledger as a bank liability, owing whatever the going price of that much gold is. The actual assets ledger is separate from the credit ledger. The bank then issues 7 to 10 times the value of my actual asset on deposit with them as loans of credit to other parties, and sits in the middle of this situation. Please note that credit is a separate and different thing than an asset. When banks issue a credit, it becomes a debt for whomever accepts it. Until the debt is paid, including the interest on it, the bank has to stand good for it. In the case of my gold bar, the bank owes me my actual asset back, plus interest. They are loaning credit based on the value of my asset to others and making money off of my assets, so that is only fair. The bank is dependent on other people pay their debts to the bank in order for the bank to be able to pay me. The bank itself has no assets to loan. It is acting entirely as a middleman and trading off of other people's assets. Please note that even though my asset stays in the bank the whole time, it has been monetized, used as the basis to issue fiat dollars as credit. As others pay back the loan of credit, the bank recoups what it owes me in terms of credit, but credit is not an actual asset. It's just a debt countering the debt that the bank already owes me. This is called expunging an asset loan. The bank is working to pay back what it owes me already, plus interest, from loaning out 7 to 10 times the actual value of my asset to others as credit at interest. Because bank loan interest is moderated by law, they have to loan out this same value several times merely to recoup what they already owe, but at a certain point, they break even and begin making pure profit, which they don't share with me, the original special depositor. But they are still making loans based on my special deposit. Therein lies the rub. They didn't stop and let well enough alone. They pooled my asset with other assets of the same kind and continued to use it to issue more credit and generate more loans. Now instead of 10 loans based on my asset, there are 200 loans partially based on my single asset, and it is impossible to tell which 200 loans my asset is supporting and for how much, but it is apparent that some of those loans are going to fail and the bank is going to be on the hook for it. It is also apparent the bank is going to try to get off the hook for this and pass the pain on to whom? The depositors, who are in fact the bank's own creditors. And the depositors for the most part, don't even know what is going on or how confused and bad this situation is. They just trust that the bank is going to return their gold bars whenever they need them. So, imagine that your ancestor made a special deposit to a bank, or the US Federal Reserve, for example, 100 years ago, because the bank hasn't paid back the special deposit and hasn't paid the interest on that special deposit in 100 years. What happens when you walk in the door and say, "I am Joe Schmo, here's my deposit receipt and ID. I'd like to withdraw my grandfather's gold which has been on deposit here since 1819. I'll tell you what happens: sheer, blind panic and denial of the "this can't be happening" kind. Those deposits have been there so long, sleeping so peacefully, and have been used to back so much debt that the bankers are thrown into complete disarray. Suddenly, they are faced with not only having to cough up the gold that was deposited, but all the interest on the gold. And they can't do it. They know that they are facing the loss of the special deposit base that lets them loan credit, and without that initial deposit, they have no basis to make more loans, therefore, no way to recoup. All it takes is innocent Joe Schmo walking in and wanting to take his asset somewhere and do something else with it. So the bankers wig out. They go to the government. They go to the military. They say it's a matter of national security. And then they all make up various kinds of stories to excuse them from honoring the plain fact that the depositor's property is owed back to him or her, plus interest. I think that in the past 10 years I have heard every excuse possible for the banks to hold on to control of special deposits that are in fact owed to living people who are the legitimate heirs of those deposited assets. And it is all bourgeois. 100%. Of course, they can't show any actual contract giving them permission to do any of this, so they just lie their rumps off and make up all sorts of fanciful excuses for not returning the actual assets to the actual owners. Most of these excuses are the dog ate my homework kind. Here's an example: the depository fees haven't been paid. Oh, but wait a minute, I never agreed to pay any depository fees, and you didn't ask for any at the time the deposit was made. Besides which, you've been making money on my asset for 30 years and have to pay me interest, so why haven't you taken the depository fees out of what you already owe me as interest? We all know how this is supposed to work. You place your gold bar on deposit with a bank for safekeeping. They are supposed to return your gold bar whenever you have need of it. If they don't, something is drastically wrong, and a crime is happening. Simple as that. In recent years, the banks and the municipal government, the one run as a franchise of the Holy See by members of Congress, have gotten even more creative and sought to cover their butts by claiming that you are an incompetent ward of their state organization, a pauper left as a baby on the doorstep, so that all your assets including your body and good name, are all in the keeping of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico and are chattel properties backing U.S. debts. Did you get that? You were purportedly donated to the United States' Commonwealth of Puerto Rico as a baby. Aha. Except that nobody told your mother any of this, and they sure as hell didn't tell you this cock and bull story. It's all just a tremendously big lie, foisted off by the members of the United States Congress, the Municipal Government Corps Board of Directors. Now, I know that, and the bankers know that, so they are scared to death of me and spend their days making up stories about me. I must be crazy. I must be up to something. I must intend to crush them all. I must be involved in some nefarious plot to harm millions of people. Why else would I show up on their doorstep and flash my deposit receipt? And, once they do, somehow, scrape together the means to pay me back, what am I going to do with all that money and credit? Let me suggest to you that nobody is served by destroying the economy or harming trade. Nobody. Neither is it just or fair that depositors be deprived of the use and enjoyment of their own assets. If I want some of the credit that is owed to me as interest, I should be able to access it. For some reason, the banks are trying to paint me as an irresponsible madwoman, who would jerk all the special deposits out of the banks and mix them around and destroy some banks and favor others and create all sorts of terrifying disruption, and this is the story they peddle, when in fact, all I am asking for is, 1, an accounting, and 2, reasonable access to credit that is already owed and long overdue. Right now, the issue is access to the national credit that the American states and people are owed. We have been owed credit for our work and our goods for over 100 years. We were simply left in the dark, mischaracterized, and not told how to access the mutual offset credit exchanges we have been owed all along. So, let's deal with that issue first. The credit is on the books. We know where it is, we know basically how much it is. 3 offices buried in the IRS maze are not going to be able to process the volume of claims using red rubber stamps, so we suggest hiring a lot more staff, and developing a special national credit redemption card that can be used for specific expenses, including mortgage payments, medical and dental expenses, utility bills, and school loans. That's a start. Let's start there and get some actual practical relief to those who deserve it most. As for my other request, I have already bluntly stated that I don't even believe in money. None of it. Not credit. Not coin. None of it. I am pleased to hear that the Vatican finally honored my request and set up my fiduciary account, but not pleased to hear all the scuttlebutt gossip and ideas about what I am going to do with it. I am going to do exactly what I told you all that I was going to do with the fiduciary fund. What I care about is the actual, factual world, about the people and the animals and the earth. I am not likely to pursue any pie-in-the-sky ideas, nor likely to waste any resources. My car may be a BMW, but it is 16 years old. Left to myself, God willing, I will still be driving it 10 years from now. My house is nice, but it is small, and needs some petty, mostly cosmetic repairs. Have you all got the picture? I live this way because I am not a consumer at heart. I have no debt. My car is paid off. My house is paid off. No credit cards. The only things cluttering my house are books, houseplants, 2 dogs and a cat. Why, then, would I suddenly go crazy and spend on nonsense and luxuries? All those that are clacking their jaws and spreading that fear can just go home and soak their heads. There is a need for an organizational nexus to connect Americans to the rest of the world. There is a need for a valid, lawful, local authority which is competent to enforce the public law of this country. Here we are. We are the priority creditors of the banks, and no mistake about that. We aren't going to be bought off with beads and trinkets. We aren't going to mistake credit for actual assets, much less our own actual assets. And we are not lost at sea. Now that we have all that cleared up, plainly stated, and on the table for everyone to see, can we get started cleaning the rest of this mess up? I brought my mop and bucket.